you ever seen something unnatural? Like, I'm talking really unnatural, to the point where it's funny. Like today's professional bodybuilder, for example, they're so huge, men and women, that you can just tell that they're on something, on some kind of enhancer or steroid of some type, because they're just so big.
I am one natural human being.
Or how about, like, I know people who can hyperextend their elbow, so it looks like it's breaking, but it's not.
Or how about those kung fu movies? You're watching the lips say, "Jing Gao," and what you're hearing is, "Oh, look at the telly, look, the market's on fire. Oh, watch out for the man with sandal, he's going to eat your chickens. Oh, bother."
What makes that so weird is it's just so unnatural.
Sometimes people live very unnatural lives. We've all heard of child prodigies who end up growing up and becoming great athletes or musicians or actors. Their natural talents and gifts propel them to a life that's totally unnatural. Take Jesus, for example. Jesus was born in the barn next to cows. He ended up growing up, living a life without sin, and then ultimately had to die for the sins of all mankind. Talk about unnatural. That's crazy.
When Jesus started his ministry at 30, he talked about lots of things. Heaven and hell were some of the main topics he talked about, and how to get to each place. Basically how it worked is his followers join him in heaven, but then the others end up in hell, because Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me."
So if you look at what Jesus defines as the criteria for becoming one of his disciples and then eventually going to heaven, you'll hear him say things like this. In John 8, he says, "If you are truly one of my disciples, you will obey my teachings." And then in John 14, he says, "If you love me, you will obey my commandments."
In Luke 9, Jesus says, "Deny yourself, pick up your cross daily, and follow me." And in Luke 14, he says, "No one can be my disciple unless you give up everything for me." And also in that same chapter, he says, "You must love me even more than your own life."
And in John 15, Jesus says, "My true disciples produce much fruit." Now these criteria can't be ignored or taken lightly, because the leader of a particular following gets to determine the criteria for his or her followers. Take for example, I wanted to be a spokesperson for a vegetarian organization, but everybody knows I love to eat beef and bacon and meats of all kinds. Now this wouldn't make any sense, because my lifestyle eating these meats doesn't match the lifestyle of a vegetarian.
Or let's say I want to be in an animal rights march, and I love to hunt, everyone knows it, and I walk around with fur coats all day. That wouldn't make sense. Same as if I was to be a lumberjack and I want to take part in a Save the Trees campaign. That wouldn't make sense. That's very unnatural. So when Jesus says things like, "Pick up your cross daily and follow me," and "My disciples produce much fruit," and he always talks about obedience, we have to take notice, because he's our leader. If we don't, we'll look about as unnatural as a vegetarian eating a Big Mac, or like an animal rights activist working at a slaughterhouse, or even Paul Bunyan posing as a tree hugger. If we don't take notice and pay attention to Jesus' criteria, we'll be self-defined Christians who claim belief in Jesus, but yet live in a lifestyle just like the world. If we don't take notice of and follow his criteria, we'll look about as unnatural as walking backwards, where our professed faith goes one direction, but then our lifestyle takes us in a completely opposite direction.
If you think about it, walking backwards is not only unnatural, it's flat out dangerous. You don't know where you're heading, and you're likely to eventually get hurt. It's the same way spiritually. If you're one of the many self-defined Christians out there today, you could be in serious danger, eternal danger. In Matthew 7, Jesus is talking about Judgment Day, and he's talking about a lot of people who are going to say, "But Lord, we prophesied, we cast out demons, we did miracles in your name." And he's going to say to them, "I never knew you. Depart, you who practice lawlessness." Could these people that Jesus is talking to be the same self-defined Christians that we see today? People who truly believe that they are Christians, but they practice lawlessness with their lifestyle. Could Jesus be speaking to a multitude of self-defined Christians who are spiritually walking backwards?
Instead of being self-defined Christians, because we said a prayer once years ago We need to pay attention to Jesus' criteria so that we can become Christ-defined Christians. All Christians claim to follow Jesus, but if we don't specifically pay attention to His criteria, we're in danger and could end up deceived and walking backwards. However, if we do pay attention to His criteria, we'll look natural. And maybe for once, the world will actually see Jesus among His followers.
Then there's Judgment Day. James says that faith without deeds is dead. Basically, this means that your faith is useless if not backed up by good works. You can have all the faith that you want, but if it's not backed up by good deeds, it dies.
Then the question becomes, what happens on Judgment Day with dead faith? Talk about unnatural, people expecting to get into heaven with their faith useless and dead.
Basically, James is saying you have to have both faith and deeds. Now we know that the Bible stresses the importance of faith, but true faith in Jesus will cause you to live differently and then produce good fruit.
Just like walking, you have to face the direction you're walking for the best results. Spiritually, this means that my life and deeds must be headed in the same direction as my professed faith.
If it isn't, you're unnaturally walking backwards, and on Judgment Day, it won't matter which way you're facing. What will matter is which way your life is headed. In other words, you can proclaim your faith in Jesus all you want, but if that isn't backed up by a lifestyle change, you could be in some serious trouble.
So don't walk spiritually backwards by being a self-defined Christian, which you say you're a Christian, but you live exactly like the world. Don't walk spiritually backwards by letting anyone else, other than Jesus Christ Himself, determine the criteria by which you follow. Be a Christ-defined Christian so that on Judgment Day, there are no horrific surprises, because according to the Bible, self-defined Christians have a very different destination than Christ-defined Christians.